almost walked past. On the cold iron bench of the park, beneath sunlight breaking in fragments through the trees, something small lay still, wrapped tight in layers of silver duct tape that caught the light. From a distance, I thought it was nothing more than an old toy or a scrap of meaningless trash someone had left behind. A piece of plastic, shaped vaguely like an animal, abandoned in plain sight. But then, it trembled. So slight a shiver, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I stepped closer, heart pounding, and when I bent down, my throat locked tight. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't trash. It was alive. A Doberman puppy, barely more than a month old. So small it could fit into the palm of my hand. That fragile body was bound so tightly in the silver tape that it couldn't move at all. Its head tilted to one side, eyes sealed shut, breath thin and uneven, a thread of life unraveling. It looked like something broken, discarded. But when I leaned close, I heard it. The faintest rasp, a breath cut to pieces. Above it, fluttering in the wind, a crumpled scrap of paper taped down with the same duct tape. Just a few crooked words. Nobody's. Take it. I read it again. And again. The words hit me like a bucket of ice poured straight into my chest. Nobody's, no one's. A sentence handed down to this tiny creature as if its life was worth less than nothing. Someone had looked into those unformed eyes and decided it did not deserve to exist. Around me, the city moved on. Laughter, guitar chords from the grass, children sprinting past. Adults are carrying coffee cups without glancing sideways. No one slowed. No one stopped. And in the middle of all that noise, the puppy lay invisible, taped like garbage, erased from the world. I knelt down. My hands shook as they touched the cold sharpness of the tape. It bit into my skin, leaving a burning red mark. On the puppy's body, the tape had carved deep bruises, purple bands pressed into flesh like evidence of cruelty. I pressed my fingertips lightly to its chest. Weak. But there. Faint heartbeats. Trembling, still pushing back against death in silence. My eyes blurred. I am not the kind of man who cries easily. 38 years old, I've watched friends leave this world too soon, carried losses that never let go. But nothing had broken me open the way this did. A Doberman the size of my hand, tied and abandoned like a thing, still fighting for breath. My voice slipped out, unsteady. No, you are not nobody. You are somebody. Do you hear me? Somebody. The puppy didn't open its eyes, but the corner of its mouth twitched, just a fraction, as if answering. I drew it to my chest, panic surging through me. The whole of San Francisco faded, the screech of bus brakes, the rhythm of street musicians, the shuffle of shoes. All of it dissolved into silence. Only the fragile breath against my ribs remained. I thought of how many people had sat on that bench today, how many eyes had passed over without seeing, and I asked myself, if I walked away too, would this heartbeat vanish without a trace, unnoticed by anyone? It felt like a test. Those words, nobody's, drilled deeper into my skull, but my chest rebelled, shouting against them, no, no life is meaningless. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. I lowered my head, lips brushing the sparse, dust-scented fur damp with tears, and whispered a name I didn't know I had been carrying. Rook. A short name. Solid. Like a promise. The small body stirred, barely, but enough to tear my heart apart, as if it had heard me, as if it had agreed. I held it closer, wrapping my coat around it, making a shelter with nothing but cloth and resolve, and I rose to my feet. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only this. From that moment on, my life was bound to this fragile pulse of existence. A Doberman once marked as trash now became a vow in my chest. I held him tight, and I walked on. I crouched low, holding Rook against my chest, my eyes still fixed on that crumpled scrap of paper. Nobody's. Take it. The words were crooked, warped as if scribbled in rage or indifference, yet sharp enough to erase a living soul. I read them once, twice. My chest tightened. Those 4 words weren't just a note. They were a death sentence, written for a dog who hadn't even had the chance to grow. Around me, the world kept turning. A couple laughed loudly while taking selfies. A group of young men played guitar under the trees. A mother hurried past with a stroller, never glancing our way. Everyone rushed toward their own small joys. No one bent down. No one saw the tiny body wrapped in cold tape, trembling in my hands. I couldn't stop asking myself, how many people had sat on this bench today? How many eyes had slid past? How many feet had walked by? And not one stopped. Not one hand reached to peel back the tape, or even wondered if it was a toy. The whole city had decided Rook was invisible. I pulled my coat closer so his fragile breath wouldn't vanish into the cool wind. He was so light I feared I could crush him by accident. Yet that weightlessness only made my heart twist harder. A Doberman should grow fast, strong, with ears rising like spears. But Rook was different, like a raindrop snatched by the wind before it could fall. Looking closer, I saw the bruises where the tape cinched around his belly. Baby's skin swollen, thin fur matted with dirt. I touched it gently, and it felt like brushing the petals of a wildflower already crushed underfoot. My vision blurred. 38 years, I had seen my share of hard stories, but never had pain stood so clearly in front of me. I lifted my head, scanning the crowd. A man with headphones nearly bumped me, frowned, and kept going. A young woman with a Starbucks cup glanced once, then turned away. A little boy pointed at Rook, about to speak, but his mother tugged him along. I wanted to shout, "Stop! Look! This is a life, not trash." But the words caught in my throat. In that moment, I realized the cruelest truth wasn't in the note or the tape. It was in the indifference. The quiet death of small creatures doesn't come from a single act of cruelty, but from hundreds of eyes that choose to look away. I bent lower, pressing Rook tight against my ribs. He didn't move, only exhaled in broken bursts, so faint I had to lean in to hear. I whispered like a prayer, "Don't leave. Please don't disappear." Without warning, a memory broke the surface. As a child, I'd once taken in a stray. It had come to my kitchen fire, trembling just like this. I still remember the night it let out its final breath before it had the chance to grow. That image followed me for years like a scar in my mind. And now, looking at Rook, the past returned. I couldn't let history repeat itself. A gust of wind passed, making the taped scrap tremble in the light. Nobody's. Take it. 4 words like a dare. My throat tightened, anger rising. Number. I would not allow it. I leaned close to Rook's ear, my voice trembling but firm. You are not nobody. You are mine. You will live. Rook quivered, a faint but defiant signal. My chest ached because in that weak tremor I heard an answer. And from that moment I knew. I would not let go. I would walk on, even if the whole world turned its back. I drew the coat tight, a shield for this small pulse of life. Ahead, the path out of the park blurred in the fading light, but I had never seen so clearly. As long as I had breath left, Rook would not leave this world in silence. I sat there, clutching Rook to my chest, and understood I no longer had the right to hesitate. The silver scrap of paper kept trembling in the wind, repeating those 4 words, "Nobody's, take it," like an accusation. But the fragile breath against my ribs whispered back, "Please don't leave me. I am 38, not a doctor, not a hero, just an ordinary man who happened to pass through a park." Yet the instant I heard that weak heartbeat, every reason to walk away dissolved into nothing. I lowered my lips near his ear and spoke the name again, clearer, firmer. "Rook. Do you hear me? You have a name now. You are Rook." The name rose like a vow, not a call but a keeping. Rook quivered, so faintly, but enough for a thread of light to break through. A dog once marked no one's had just become a part of me. I tightened my coat, turning my body into a cocoon. My hands shook, but did not stop. I stood, drew a deep breath, and began to walk. Each step stretched like a lifetime. The stone path through the park was crowded, people talking, laughing, sipping coffee. They glanced at me, clutching something close to my chest. Some frowned. Some looked away. No one asked. No one stopped. I walked faster. Rook's body was feather light, but each tremor in him clenched my chest tighter. I held him as if any gap might let him slip into nothing. The wind from the park carried salt from the bay and eucalyptus from the trees. But I smelled only one thing: the dust, the tang of duct tape, and the fear seeping from the tiny body in my arms. I bent my head and whispered like a lullaby, "Hold on, Rook. Don't leave your father." Panic wrapped around me as I thought of the next minutes. I didn't know if I'd be fast enough. I didn't know if a vet could even help. But one thing was certain: I would not let go. Across the wide lawn, I caught sight of the faded sign of a veterinary clinic at the edge of the park. A paw print painted long ago, colors worn by years. I remembered it like a lamp in fog. They didn't ask many questions there. They didn't judge. They simply reached out when a life needed a hand. I started to run. My steps hammered the ground, my heart breaking against my ribs. Rook was too light, yet I held him as if I carried the whole world. My coat billowed with each breath, a cocoon trying to keep a small flame alive. People turned as I passed, eyes curious, whispers trailing, but I didn't care. The city blurred. There was only one destination left, the green-painted wooden door of the clinic. I almost burst through it. The bell over the door jingled, and a nurse at the desk looked up. When her eyes fell on the puppy in my arms, her mouth opened. "Oh my God, a Doberman puppy? He's only a month old?" I nodded, throat closing, unable to speak. Tears burned as I watched her hands move quickly, calling another tech. I handed Rook over, emptiness rushing in as the faint warmth left my arms. They laid him on the stainless steel table. The white towel beneath made him look even smaller, as fragile as a speck of dust. I stood still in the corner, my hands trembling, my heart suspended. I heard the vet step in, voice calm but urgent. "Pulse is weak. Hurry with the fluids, get the formula syringe ready." I swallowed hard, vision blurring. In that instant, I knew. This was only the beginning. No matter how many nights lay ahead, no matter how many tears, my decision had already been made. The moment I spoke his name, Rook was no longer nobody's. He was mine. He was somebody. The glass door shut hard behind me, and the outside world disappeared. Inside the clinic, there was only the stark white of fluorescent light, the sharp scent of disinfectant, and the hurried footsteps of people in lab coats. I stood still, palms still trembling, as they laid Rook on the cold, stainless steel table. He was so small that the white towel around him looked like it was swallowing him whole. A Doberman who should one day stand tall and strong now fits inside a single hand, shivering under the lights. The vet bent down, gloved hands moving, eyes narrowing. She lifted his eyelid, pressed her ear to his chest, then looked up. Voice calm but weighted. Weak pulse. Hypoglycemia. Hypothermia. My knees went soft as if they might give way right there, but I gripped the edge of the table, forcing myself upright. I had to stand. I had to witness. A technician held out a small syringe of formula milk. The vet dipped the tip, guided it gently to the corner of Rook's mouth. At first he turned his face away, weak, as if he no longer wanted it. My heart tightened. I thought, if he refuses, if he no longer has the strength to swallow, this is the end. But then, a drop of milk touched his tongue. Rook hesitated, then swallowed. A movement so small no one but us could hear it, and yet, to me, it thundered. I let out a shuddering breath, tears blurring my sight. One drop of milk, one gulp of life. Good. Very good, the vet murmured, more to herself than anyone else. They quickly threaded a line into his tiny leg, a vein as fine as a thread. Medical tape anchored the fragile vessel. Seeing his small body wrapped in tubes and gauze made my heart clench. I wanted to rush forward and hold him, but my hands were locked against the edge of the table. The monitor beeped, steady but faint. I fixed my eyes on each beat. Every pause between them stretched long, a blade hanging over us. I didn't dare blink. After a moment, the vet looked up and spoke quickly. He'll need constant care. 24 hours a day. If you want to keep him alive, you must commit. I nodded hard, as if one nod could sign a contract with fate. My voice came out rough. I will. I won't let him go. Her eyes softened for a second before she turned back to her team. Warm him up. Hot water bottles, more dry towels. I watched them wrap him in layers of fabric, place warm packs against his tiny flank. The sight tore at me. A puppy who should be curled against his mother's belly, drinking milk, hearing a warm heartbeat, now lying on a steel table, alive only because of syringes and machines. I bit my lip, remembering the park, the hard duct tape, the cold scrap of paper. 4 words. Nobody's. Take it. And I told myself, no. He is not invisible. He is not trash. He is Rook. A tiny sound escaped, so faint I almost missed it. But when I heard it, my heart leapt. Rook opened his mouth, a fragile cry like a broken bird's wing. Weak, but enough to make the vet lift her head, a flicker of hope in her eyes. He's responding. We keep going, she said, crisp but certain. I reached out, resting my hand on the towel. Rook's body trembled beneath the cloth, but was still warm. I whispered, You are somebody. Do you hear me? You are Rook. His eyelid fluttered as if in answer. I felt my own tears fall onto my hand, hot. Time slowed. I counted each beep of the monitor, each broken breath, each drop of milk at his lips. I knew this wasn't a battle that would end in hours. It was a fight for life, second by second, where even a blink could mean goodbye. But in that moment, standing over this tiny creature clinging to the edge, I knew I had already stepped into this fight, and I would not back down. I carried Rook out of the clinic just as San Francisco's lights began to glow. The evening wind swept past, cold and damp, but inside my coat pulsed the trembling breath of a life that had clawed back a fragile chance. The vet's words echoed again and again. Formula every 2 hours. Keep him warm. Don't let him sleep too deeply. If you slip, he won't wake up." I nodded, but deep in my chest I knew this would be the longest night of my life. Back at my small apartment, I spread an old flannel towel over a cardboard box, ringed it with warm rice bags like a makeshift nest. I set Rook down, my heart clenching at the sight of him curling up like a handful of ashes. He was so light that even laying him on the cloth felt dangerous, as though one careless touch might break him. I stroked his back gently, feeling each little ridge of bone beneath the thin skin. I prepared the formula, diluted exactly as instructed, and dripped a few drops on my wrist to test the heat. Then, with the tiny plastic syringe, I lifted his head. His clouded eyes stayed shut, his nose trembling. The first time, he refused, turning away weakly, milk spilling down onto the towel. Panic surged, my hands shaking. I tried again, my voice a whisper of prayer. "Rook, please. Just one sip. You need it to live." It wasn't until the third attempt, when a stray drop touched his tongue, that he finally swallowed. Just one small swallow, but I broke down, crying like a child, because that tiny act weighed as heavy as the whole universe. That night, I didn't sleep. I set alarms exactly 2 hours apart. Each time the bell rang, I rose with burning eyes, mixed the milk, reheated the rice bags, and lifted Rook gently. Sometimes he stirred weakly, his little legs pushing at the air as if searching for his mother's warmth. I choked back tears, pressing him to my chest so my heartbeat could stand in for the one he no longer heard from her. In the spaces between, I whispered to him about everything. The rain on Market Street, the stray I'd raised as a boy, the fear of losing a four-legged friend. I didn't speak for him to understand, but so he would know the world wasn't entirely silent, so he could hear my voice and hold on to life. By 3 a.m., I was spent. The apartment lay silent except for the tick of the clock. Each time Rook whimpered, I snapped awake. Each time he was silent too long, I pressed my ear to his belly, terrified that tiny heartbeat had vanished. Sometimes I trembled uncontrollably at the thought that losing him could happen at any moment. At one point, I slid down to the floor, back against a chair, Rook swaddled in a small towel against my chest. I patted him lightly and remembered my father's words. "Anything small can be mended, if you have enough patience." I had never believed it until now. Looking at Rook, I saw my father was right. A fragile life can still be kept if someone is patient enough not to let go. Before dawn, with my eyes bloodshot, so tired I could no longer tell the clock's tick from my own heartbeat, Rook stirred. He tilted his head, nose seeking the hollow of my palm, then exhaled a long, steady breath, smoother than any before. I froze, then laughed through tears. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. A peaceful breath in the middle of a long nightmare. When the first light crept through the window, I knew we had survived the first night. But deep inside, I also understood this was only the beginning of a journey filled with storms. That morning, thin light streamed through the window, painting pale gold across the floor. I was exhausted, eyes burning, hands trembling from a night stretched taut. But in my arms, Rook was still breathing, weakly but steadier. I allowed myself a single, fragile exhale, a moment of believing the worst of the storm had passed. I set him in his little towel nest and mixed a fresh bottle of formula. Bending down, I whispered softly, "Good job, Rook. You made it through one night. We're going to be okay." He shifted, parted his lips, his tiny feet paddling the air as if answering. I laughed through tears. For the first time in hours, I felt hope dare to bloom, but that hope was ripped apart before it could grow. Near noon, as I prepared to feed him again, Rook's body went limp in my hands. His small head lolled to one side, eyes closed, unresponsive. The breath that had been faint but present was now almost gone. "Rook?" I called, my voice breaking. No answer, no movement, only silence. I shook him lightly, then harder, but he stayed still. Fear slashed through me like a cold blade. I pressed my ear to his chest. His tiny heartbeat nearly stopped. I couldn't hold back the cry tearing out of me. "No! Not now! Don't leave me, Rook!" In my mind, the park bench surged back. The scrap of paper, "Nobody's. Take it!" echoed like a curse. I felt myself collapsing, as if all the sleepless hours, all the effort, had only led to this moment. I clutched him to my chest, my own heart racing, crying as I bolted out of the apartment. The streets of San Francisco spun before my eyes, sounds blurring, horns, footsteps, wind. None of it mattered. I only knew I had to run, carrying that tiny body back to the clinic, racing death itself. The green wooden door swung open, the bell rang, and the vet recognized us instantly. She didn't ask questions, only shouted, "On the table!" Now! I nearly collapsed as I laid him down. My whole body trembled. The vet and her technicians surrounded him, reattaching the line, squeezing oxygen, and setting hot packs. I stood in the corner, hand over my mouth, feeling the floor sway beneath me. Every second dragged like a lifetime. I listened to the machines, long gaps, then weak beeps again. I prayed, something I hadn't done in years. Hands clasped, whispering like a madman. "Take all my strength. Just give him one more chance. Don't let him vanish like this." The vet turned to me, her eyes gentle but grave. "He's still with us, but he's critical. He might not make it through today." Her words landed like a hammer. I heard them, but my heart refused to accept them. I stepped closer, placing my hand on the towel wrapped around Rook. His tiny paw moved, faint but reaching my finger, a touch as light as paper, but enough to crush my heart. I bent low, whispering into his ear, "You are not nobody. You are Rook. You are everything to me." Tears fell onto his back, soaking into the towel. I didn't wipe them away. I just sat there, my head against the cold wall, listening to each broken beep of the monitor like scissors cutting through hope. In that moment, I understood why people call this the breaking point. Not just because the life in your hands might vanish, but because you feel yourself shattering too. If Rook left, I would lose more than a puppy. I would lose the chance to prove that a small life is worth being seen, worth being loved. I stayed there, not knowing how many hours had passed. Each time the machine paused longer, my heart stopped. Each time he whimpered faintly, I cried like a child. I knew I had reached the edge of despair. But even at the edge, I kept holding that tiny paw, because if I let go, I knew I would never forgive myself. I don't know how long I sat on the plastic chair in the corner. The light outside the window shifted from dull gray to pale gold, announcing a new day. But inside me, night hadn't passed. I clung to Rook's tiny paw in my palm, like someone gripping the last thread of a rope. The monitor kept beeping, faint, slow, but not yet silent. I fixed my eyes on each sound, strained to catch each ragged breath. Every time the pause between beeps stretched longer, my heart jumped, afraid it was the last. The vet came over, laying a light hand on my shoulder. Her voice was low, warm but cautious. "We've done everything we can. Now it's up to him." I nodded, throat locked. I bent down, whispering right beside Rook's ear. "You've come this far. Don't give up now, Rook. You're not nobody anymore. You're somebody. You're mine." And then the miracle came, quiet as the first breath of morning. That small body shuddered once. His ear flicked, delicate as a butterfly wing. I held my breath, heart pounding. A tiny whimper escaped him, so soft no one might have heard it unless they leaned close. But to me, it rang like a great bell. "Rook, can you hear me?" His small foot stirred. Toes curled, then unfurled, then curled again, as if he were trying to grasp air, to grasp life. Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the towel wrapped around him. The vet looked up, her stern eyes softening. He's responding. He still wants to stay. Everyone in the room paused for a heartbeat, as if listening together. And in that hush, Rook opened his eyes, not wide, just a narrow slit, clouded, heavy. But the tiny black pupils flashed for a moment and found me. My whole body shook. I had feared I would never see that look again. And now, there it was, weak but deliberate, saying, "I'm here." I whispered, voice breaking into tears. "That's right, Rook. You're here. You came back." The vet nodded, signaling the nurse to adjust the IV. A drop of fluid slipped down the hair-thin tube, mingling with the faint blood in his veins. I pressed my finger to his tiny paw. Suddenly, Rook stiffened and squeezed my finger. A grip so small it would seem meaningless to anyone else, but to me, it was the whole sky. I choked up, sobbing harder than I ever had. The room fell silent except for my quiet crying and the steadier beeping of the monitor. His heartbeats were still fragile, but they were growing stronger. Around midday, for the first time since I'd found him on that iron bench, Rook tried to lift his head, trembling, swaying, then falling back. But he tried again, and this time he held it for a few seconds, long enough for me to see that inside that frail body was a will tougher than anything I'd ever known. I pressed my lips to his forehead, whispering, "You're my little warrior." Inside me, despair gave way to something else, a painful pride. I knew we weren't out of danger. I knew there would be countless sleepless nights, countless moments where my heart would seize at his labored breaths. But I also knew that from this moment, Rook had chosen to stay, and I had chosen to go with him all the way. As the afternoon sun slipped through the window, casting gold over the small towel where Rook lay, I sat there, eyes still red, hand still holding his tiny paw. And for the first time, I dared to believe we had won the first battle in a long war. He was no longer nobody's. He was Rook, a living soul who had fought death to be seen, to be loved. And I, a man who thought he was just passing through a park, had become witness to the simplest miracle, that even the smallest life can flare back to existence if one hand holds on and does not let go. And I wondered, how many lives out there are waiting for an eye to stop, for a hand to reach out? How many fragile creatures tremble in the dark, needing only one person to see them so they know they are not invisible? Have you ever saved a living being? A dog, a cat, or some small soul that seemed beyond hope? If you have, tell your story. Because compassion doesn't stop at one act. It spreads from person to person, like a flame passed through the night. Thank you for staying with me and Rook to the end of this journey. If this story touched your heart, please share it, so more eyes pause, more hands don't turn away. And if you want to keep walking with us, subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but for the small lives waiting to hear your voice. Because all it takes is one person who doesn't look away, and a life can be saved.